Cosmin took the name Callistos at his coronation. On the 10th of January, 1310, Khan Bugu the Lion shocked the world when he marched through the gates of Zamandos, and Basilius Epiphanios of Armeniakan had bent the knee as a tributary to the Golden Horde. Khan Bugu would also convert to Islam soon after. In 1313, the West African Great Holy War failed, and the tribes of Africa went back to fighting each other. In March, a sizable revolt broke out against the prostrated Emperor Epiphanios in Armeniakan. In 1314, King Callistos converted to the Massalian faith at the behest of his teacher, but a year later, he would return to the Bogomilist faith. Not before he had disrupted the process of formalization, however, having to undergo consolamentum and begin it all again. On the 20th of February 1318, the revolt succeeded, and the young Basilius Licanius was placed on the throne. The Golden Horde would immediately invade and annex much land in the Caucasus, which the young Basilius used as terms for peace. By 1323, due to Khan Bugu the Lion's conversion to Islam, pressure was taken off the Muslim world as he focused his conquests into the Christian realms of Kiev and Armeniakan in the west. As such, the Muslims declared a jihad to reclaim their holy cities of Mecca and Medina for Armeniakan. In 1324, King Callistos married his mistress Bela ben Reuben after she fell with child. A Jew, she was unpopular at court, leading to King Callistos passing a series of reforms protecting the small Jewish minority in the country. This led to a significant migration of Jews from around Europe to come to Wallachia, many of them settling in Targovishte as apothecaries, merchants, and even landed lords in some cases. Bela gave birth to a daughter, who was named Dipurga. In 1325, the jihad was successful, and given that the Golden Horde contributed thousands of men to the cause, the new kingdom of Arabia was given to a Mongol, Khan Kachi. Due to this shame, Armeniakan suffered another revolt. Bela, meanwhile, bore another daughter named Carmen, and a year after, in 1328, another named Flandina was born. In 1329, another daughter was born named Petra. In 1330, after 4 daughters, King Callistos finally fathered a son, who he named Franjo. Around 1332, Petra was showing serious oddities, most likely due to her mother drinking herself to sleep during her particular pregnancy. Petra was known to make a buzzing sound near other children. Animals disliked her, and she broke out laughing at the sight of blood and violence. Rumors spread that she was demon-spawned. But King Callistos, saddened and concerned, consulted his court chaplain Yulia. She, to his astonishment, agreed, believing not only that Petra was a spawn of Satan, but also that Queen Bela was a witch that fornicated with the devil. King Callistos put her to death for what she said about his family. By 1333, Princess Flandina began to complain of some creature throwing needles or spines at her, waking her from her sleep before it ran off hissing. Servants found many of these needles around the castle, and rumors began anew about the demon child, Petra. King Callistos fired a host of servants for their gossip, believing himself surrounded by superstitious nonsense. For this, he earned the moniker of the Clueless, a bitter gift from his subjects. Later that year, Khan Bilge, son of Bugu, suffered a bout of intense disease, and in the interim converted to Christianity. He survived, but kept his desperately adopted faith, much to the dismay of his Muslim allies to the south, fearing renewed conquests into their lands. They were right to worry, for by November the pressure had shifted back onto its original focus, the Golden Horde resuming its wars against the Muslim world. In 1333, Prince Franjo was found dead, face-locked in a terrible grimace with a trickle of blood running down his cheek, as though a terrible nightmare had struck him dead. Physicians could find nothing wrong with the body, and the people blamed the demon child yet again. The king continued to defend his daughter against their accusing eyes and fingers. On the 1st of December 1333, the 11th Crusade was a success, and Pope Victor III put Kralj Berbat the Avens, a Serbian, at the helm of this new kingdom called Crusader Turkestan. A son was born to King Callistos the Clueless in 1334, whom he named Radovan. In September, the uncle of Callistos, Imperator Costanzo the Lombardo, had ascended to the throne of Navarra. On the 6th of April 1335, at the very southern edge of the known world, a European ethnic group of mysterious origin known as the Keltamashek, typically engaging in raids and sporting bright red hair, gave rise to an emperor, Emperor Zenti the Wolf of the Zamfara Federation. founded his empire in Africa, winning out of the chaos there with over 30,000 men at his disposal to bring the rest of the continent under Zamfara control. On the 20th of July, 1335, Prince Radovan was found drooling in his bed, one eye bloodshot, mumbling about a small monster who stabbed him in the eye before it ran off. He promptly died. Again, Petra seemed ill-phased by the death of yet another brother of hers, and almost as though she was happy about it. Callistos began to wonder, but reproached himself at such thoughts. On the 19th of April, 1336, King Callistos the Clueless died at the age of 36 due to the effects of his chronic yet well-hidden alcoholism. His death also displaced the Von Popper dynasty from the throne of Wallachia, given that he failed to father any surviving sons. Wallachia passed then to the new king, a true Greek of 31 years dubbed Sophronios II, beginning the Devadna dynasty. Because of certain succession laws, Moldova in the northeast passed to one of Callistos' many daughters, namely the demon child Petra, who had been suspected of killing her brothers. A son was posthumously born to Callistos a week after his death, also named Amelra. In Moldova, no Greek names were taken upon ascension. In 1337, King Sophronios II was injured severely in a duel against his personal rival, eventually leading to his death as a result. On the 29th of May, 1340, Pope Xistus III was returning from a trip to China, the second such trip he had ever made, and the second ever journey of any pope. However, both of these trips to and from China were conducted in total secret. When he returned, in a move that shocked Europe, Pope Xistus III announced in Rome that he had peacefully agreed to become a tributary state of the Kim Empire. This was corroborated by a league of Chinese diplomats who accompanied Xistus to the Vatican and were present for his announcement. The biggest question raised by this was why? Why would the Pope, leader of all Italy and spiritual father of all Catholics, feel the need to subjugate himself to a heathen empire on the other side of the world, especially at what seemed to be the zenith of the status pontificus, the very height of its power? The truth was to be found in the success of his predecessor, Victor III. Pope Victor III not only oversaw 2 successful crusades at the edge of the known world, the 11th dragging on for 34 years, but he also put down the reform movement of Brother Angelo's pure and simple gospel, with a totality that was ruthless, bloody, and expensive. However, the final nail in that financial coffin was when he endeavored to prove to his subjects his powers as a temporal ruler and launched a campaign of infrastructure projects, namely building hospitals and roads. These projects, by the time of his death, bankrupted the status pontificus, which was a rude awakening for his successor, who scarcely had money for another decade of normal function. As a result, he made one initial trip to China in order to ask for money to free him from his debts, in exchange for a political or military mission that was typically outside of China's reach. However, the Kim Empire demanded tribute from the Mediterranean on a grand scale, which the Pope promised to provide. By the time it came due for the Pope to deliver, not only had he greatly angered his merchants and subjects, but he also came up short in his promises. He returned to China, and instead of allowing his kingdom to fall apart, bring shame upon his name, and give up his comfortable life, he offered his independence to the Kim Emperor so as to save himself and his realm from total destruction or dissolution. Meanwhile, Moldova was beset on all sides by nobles thirsty for essentially free land. A kingdom run by a little girl with barely an army and scarcely any money was essentially free for the taking. Meanwhile, King Sophronios III changed his main title from Wallachia to the Ecumenical Patriarchate, a grand step in the formalization of the Bogomilist faith. This act of Caesaropapism, however, would cause the popularity of the Bogomilist faith to decline, for it had been at this point officially scrubbed of all of its anti-establishment roots. Meanwhile, by 1340, Moldova had repelled all attempts on its land, and Queen Petra seemed to be preparing for a counterattack. Word reached Targovishte that an army of cultists, led by a trio of powerful witches, rose up to serve her and their dread master. Ecumenical Patriarch Sophronios III disregarded these fantastic tales as excuses and had his surviving commanders from the campaign jailed for incompetence. He was more worried about the Germans, with their sizable armies lined up near the northwestern border. Sophronios III matched them with a series of outposts, forts, and detachments stationed there, far and away, one might add, from the small, landlocked kingdom of Moldova. On the 1st of June 1341, Queen Petra declared war on King Sophronius III for provinces that were de jure part of Moldova. Unconcerned, he sent around 7,000 men to quell what he considered to be a petty conflict instigated by a petty kingdom. Once he received word in January of 1342 concerning their total destruction at the Battle of Tighina by an innumerable army, he believed the rumors and sent 39,000 men in a panic to quell the wars of the Demon Child. It was revealed at the Second Battle of Tighina that she was at the helm of a 20,000-man force, which left only 20,000 of the Patriarch's knights alive, forcing them to flee south to Zagor. Once in Zagor, while they were making a nighttime camp on the 26th of April, tens of thousands of cultists came out from the forests surrounding each side of the valley they were sleeping in. The slaughter at Zagor cemented Queen Petra's victory, and Patriarch Sophronius III relinquished her the two northern provinces to which she so zealously laid claim. Petra immediately broke her truce and invaded another set of provinces in the northeast. This instability and the wasting of long untested soldiers caused the realm Sophronius ruled over to fracture, losing hold of Bulgaria and Serbia. On the 10th of March 1343, Ecumenical Patriarch Sophronius III killed himself at the age of 37, leaving his cousin Athanasios II to ascend to the throne of his tattered kingdom at the age of 47. By the 24th of August, Petra broke another truce and claimed the Wallachian kingdom title from an Athanasius II. She captured him at the Battle of Gallic and had him tortured to the point of insanity before his release and surrender in September. From that point on, he would have to be looked after by his regent and council, lame and infirm, as Queen Petra continued to disregard diplomatic tradition. On the 30th of April 1344, Queen Petra demanded her special chronicles be written in order to remember her bloodline. The kind of realm that Petra reigned over was also changed officially to a kingdom of terror, after a conversation with someone she called her true father, complete with his own set of twisted laws and institutions. Meanwhile, to the east, several duchies held by Armeniakan broke away in a series of independence revolts. On the 2nd of January, the witch queen Petra not only joined the Order of Lucifer, but also founded her own bloodline after a great deal of bribes, arrests, and violence. It is known as the vile blood of Queen Petra, which is inherited matrilineally. She earned herself the moniker of the Ruthless, and from this point on would go down as one of the worst tyrants in history. In 1348, Sealand broke free from Milano's control in Scandinavia. Meanwhile, to the south, Armeniakan had been pursuing an episode of conquest westward of the Nile, bringing them into conflict with the new Zamfara Federation, led by Emperor Zenti the Wolf. This empire, boasting 30,000 men, was led and greatly peopled by those of European descent who had adopted the Keltamashek culture. As such, these red-haired desert people could trace their blood back to Spain and Italy, where they could trace their culture to the Sahara. Europe, so caught up in the shocking affairs of the last century, had scarcely noticed them. Now they were among one of the great powers, and commanded a great force. On the 23rd of January 1350, the witch queen Petra the Ruthless had borne a child of an unknown father. Many rumored her son Vlad to be born of an unholy union with Satan, but whatever the case, he now stood as her heir. On the 1st of November 1353, under the command of the Kim Empire and with their considerable backing, the Western Protectorate Status Pontificus declared war upon Deutschland. The war was over in 5 years, and Kaiser Luca the Wise bound to the protector Ngui Hen, becoming a subject member of the Western Protectorate, which immediately declared war upon Milano, thirsting for further subjugation. Meanwhile, witch queen Petra the Ruthless executed her rival at court via brazen bull. In 1359, she declared war upon Bulgaria, having already conquered Serbia and Dubrovnik. On the 1st of February, in newly cursed Europe, the Protector General marched with his army into Ivica to meet Imperator Landar of Milano. Landar is told to kneel, but instead lunges wildly, knocks Hen off his horse. Landar is filled with arrows at an instant. Milano had been added to the collection of states in the Western Protectorate, and the rest of Europe watched on in horror. Meanwhile, to the east, the Golden Horde claimed the Siberian wastes for themselves, and Khan Akchu the Butcher began his widespread program of proselytism, converting many Muslim lands to Catholicism. Later that month, Petra also gave birth to another mysterious son named Tuhomir. Another son was born to Petra soon thereafter, named Sas. Seeing the unprecedented events unfolding beyond her own borders, Petra sent one of her own courtiers and a fellow member of Lucifer's Own to improve relations with the Kim Empire. A daughter was born to Petra around this time, named Utica. Later, in 1361, Petra had the body of her youngest brother Amalric, whom she also killed long ago, exhumed. She made a trophy out of his small skull, using it henceforth as a cup. Another son was born to her named Ilik. On the 20th of May, Dark Prince Vlad was found dead, with a trickle of blood running down his cheek. A familiar death, many in Moldova suspected Tihomir to be yet another demon child, just like his mother Petra. Yet, those two seemed inordinately happy in their strange way when something terrible happens, as usual. None dare say anything bad about Tihomir to the Witch Queen, however, lest they wanted to stay in the Brazen Bowl. Later that year, Milano broke free from beneath the yoke of the Kim Empire under Imperator Maganov, regaining their full independence. In December, Petra gave birth to another daughter named Athena. And even later that year, the Witch Queen had her advances spurned by one of her courtiers, so she had her possessed with a demon. Indeed, the next morning she appeared to all as having gone very suddenly and violently insane. Meanwhile, as if in a vicious cycle, the demon child Tihomir claimed that some small, hissing monster squatting on his chest tried to kill him in the night, leaving needles strewn across the floor as it fled. This was one of Petra's other sons, Dark Prince Sas, making him the second demon child in her household, both taking faithfully after her. In 1362, an independence revolt broke out in Deutschland. On the 18th of June, Petra had conquered Bulgaria, completing her realm. On that same day, Dark Prince Tihomir was found drooling on himself, stabbed in the eye. Everyone suspected Utica, revealing herself to be yet another demon child. This was the point at which everyone knew that there was a competition for the throne already beginning amongst Petra's many seemingly fatherless demon children. On the 13th of October, Utica was struck dead in her sleep, as if by a nightmare, and it was suspected that Ilya had perpetrated this latest murder. In January of 1363, the Deutsch independence revolt failed, and the Empire of the Germans remained a tributary state of the Kim. Emperor Ruizong of the Kim Empire bestowed a serpent spear upon the Witch Queen, as a sign of good relations between the two. Petra would take quite well to this weapon, carrying it with her even at her throne. On the 5th of January 1364, an adventurer claimant to the throne of Wallachia named Claudius Silagi declared war, landing his ships from the Adriatic in Dubrovnik, making landfall with his 80,000 men. Petra raised 50,000 in response and went to war to defend her kingdom of terror. Meanwhile, Tihomir died that night of what seemed to be a wound to the eye, and all the accusatory fingers pointed this time at Athena. It would seem that every child that inherited the vile blood of Queen Petra was surely doomed to madness and devilry. By April, the forces of Claudiu were devastated at Dubrovnik and Cetina, driving him back out and restoring the unchallenged and unholy rule of the Witch Queen Petra, the Ruthless. That night, Dark Prince Sas survived an attempt on his life from Dark Prince Ilya. Tihomir finally died of what seemed to be a stroke, suspected to have been killed by Sas the night previous. As a result, Queen Petra's new heir was Dark Prince Sas. On the 4th of September, Deutschland broke free from the Western Protectorate, no longer a tributary state to the Kim Empire. Such a long-range tributary proved untenable in the end. Europe would no longer be so bowed by foreign influence, and even then was only caught by surprise and held for a handful of years. Still, the power of the Kim would never again be underestimated, and the thrall of that empire in the form of the status pontificus would now be considered a resurgent and newly aggressive threat. On the 21st of August, Dark Prince Ilya was attacked by his sister Athena, but survived. On the 21st of November, Sas died, suspected killed by Ilya. Then, Dark Prince Ilya died on the 12th of September 1368 of what seemed to be a very peculiar eye injury, leaving the Dark Princess Athena as the sole heir to Moldova, the Kingdom of Terror. In 1347, Petra began construction of her Black Castle in the capital province of Bacau. On the 11th of August, Pope Xistus III, in an attempt to absolve some of his humiliation at the hands of the Chinese, declared the 12th Crusade with Ouagadougou as its target, held by the Bambouk Kingdom in Western Africa. Beginning in the 1370s, Witch Queen Petra the Ruthless took to ever more insane pleasures to entertain herself. Namely, she would choose two landholders who happened to be at court at random and make them perform some trial for her. Typically, she would demand them to dance. Whoever's dance she disliked would be, at that instant, executed by a brazen bull, while the other would inherit all the titles they left behind, disregarding succession laws. This would oftentimes leave entire families with nothing to their name, forced into the streets as beggars. Her advisors would try and convince her to wage war as often as possible, so that she may be entertained and preoccupied with the deaths of foreign subjects instead. Petra, however, would not take their advice for sometimes decades at a time, content to rule imperiously over her native Roman lands. On the 2nd of November 1375, the 12th Crusade was successful, and the kingdom of Crusader Wagadu was established, with King Wulfnoth of the Isle of Man as its head. Meanwhile, as Dark Princess Athena became an adult, Petra went infirm at the age of 46. Many began to suspect that Athena was manipulating the health of her mother in order to get the throne for herself, but they also speculated that she was Satan's second daughter, clothed in darkness which overpowered even her wicked matriarch. Truly, it was said that the three witches who once headed Petra's cultist army had returned to cursed Moldova in order to receive their new champion in her march towards Armageddon. Miraculously, in 1376, Petra recovered from her infirmity. On the 1st of January 1377, a group of provinces in the northwest seceded, calling itself Nicopolios under their queen, Euphrosyne. A bloody conflict began, as she had a great deal of refuge seekers that had fled to her territory, away from the cursed realm of Petra. Meanwhile, suspecting a fellow cultist of plotting against her, Queen Petra ordered her bound, stuffed into a bag, and brought to her court to await a death most unbearable in the Brazen Bull, which was becoming quite routine by this point in her rule. She carried out the execution as she always had. The next morning, after the bull was emptied unceremoniously into the pig pen, she awoke to find a box upon her desk. Its contents included a brightly polished skull and a note. The note revealed that her fellow cultist, Ionella, was still alive, and also that it was Athena that was killed in the bull the night previous. Somehow, through foul dark magics and great trickery, Ionella was able to fool the guards and even the Witch Queen herself into killing the Dark Princess, hailed as the bringer of apocalypse and most impure heir of the Kingdom of Terror. Legend has it that the Witch Queen flew into a rage, tearing off all her vestments and leaping out the nearest window with nothing but her serpent spear. Covered in shards of glass, she ran to Ionella's dwelling roughly 3 miles away, leaving a trail of her own blood in her wake. By the time the royal court found out about what had happened, they went off to Ionella's manor, finding roaring flames and ruins. The 4 trees at the entrance to her manor each bore one of her limbs nailed to it. Directly inside the archway, and still visible within the flames, was Witch Queen Petra the Ruthless, falling to pieces in the fire. As she laughed her last, all the birds in the trees for a surrounding 1.5 miles dropped dead, and all the courtiers that went to go find her, 14 in total, were struck deaf. On the 13th of April, 1377, Witch Queen Petra the Ruthless died at the age of 47. Her dark rule certainly condemned her to hell, as were her wishes. The people celebrated her death with great fanfare and celebration, giving thanks and praise to God. King Yosef was then chosen to ascend to the throne at the age of 54. He was a wise, learned Greek, and a son of the House Xenon, thus officially beginning the Xenon dynasty.